What do you mean a 10-year-old got turned away because he didn't have the right shoes? Weston Fields stared down at the email on his tablet, the words making his jaw tighten. His assistant, a short and sharp-tongued woman named Dana, stood beside him, arms crossed. That's exactly what the parent wrote. Her son tried to drop in for a lesson at the Glendale skate park last Saturday. Staff told her he couldn't participate unless he bought the official gear from the pro shop. Weston rubbed his face. That's not our policy. We've always let kids skate as long as their gear's safe. She even attached a photo. Those shoes looked fine.
Dana nodded.
I double-checked. No rule about branded gear. It sounds like someone's trying to push sales over experience. Weston leaned back in his chair, tapping the armrest. He bought the skate park chain 7 years ago from 2 aging pro skaters who wanted to retire. Back then, it had just been one location. Now there were 10 spread across Southern California, each with its own manager and staff. The mission had always been the same: make skating accessible, fun, and safe for everyone, especially kids. But lately, Weston had felt something slipping. The numbers looked fine on paper, but complaints like this one had been trickling in more often. He hadn't visited a park himself in over a year, letting the district managers run the show. Maybe that was the problem. I want to see what's really happening out there, he said finally. I'll go undercover at Glendale. No one there's ever met me. They'll think I'm just some new guy. Dana raised an eyebrow. You're serious? I'll pose as a trainee. I'll work the shifts, clean the ramps, mop the floors, whatever they tell me. I need to see what kind of culture we've got brewing there. Within 2 days, Weston had dyed his graying blonde hair darker, trimmed his beard short, and ditched the suits for baggy jeans, worn Vans, and a faded hoodie. His new name was Wes. He'd never met the Glendale team face-to-face before. Most of the hiring was done by district leadership. As far as they knew, he was just another guy looking for part-time work. Yo, you Wes? The manager asked as Weston walked up to the front desk on Monday morning. Yeah. First day. Thanks for having me. The manager, a lean guy in his early 30s with a sleeve of tattoos and a Bluetooth in one ear, barely looked up from his tablet.
Cool.
I'm Bryce. You'll be shadowing today. Rules are simple: don't let kids on the ramps without a waiver, don't loan gear without ID, and don't waste time talking. We run tight. Weston nodded, keeping his expression flat. Got it. The place was bigger than he remembered. 3 ramps, a foam pit, a small retail shop, and a snack stand in the back. About 15 kids were skating when he arrived, a mix of beginners and regulars. Music blasted from overhead speakers. The staff mostly hung near the entrance, chatting or scrolling on their phones. Bryce barked orders every now and then, but didn't move much. By noon, Weston had already seen more than he'd hoped. A kid had taken a nasty fall and was left alone until another skater helped him up. A mother asking for guidance was brushed off with a "check the website." And no one had offered any tips or encouragement to the beginners struggling near the back ramp. But one person stood out. A wiry teen in a faded green staff shirt and backwards cap, maybe 19, was kneeling beside a little girl, helping her adjust her elbow pads. You're doing awesome, the kid said, his voice calm and steady. Try keeping your knees bent more. Like this. Weston watched from the corner, pretending to sweep. The girl nodded and rolled down the mini ramp again, wobbling but staying upright. She beamed. The staffer clapped. Atta girl, Penelope. Weston blinked. That name stuck with him. Penelope.
A child. He was definitely keeping an eye on that.
The teen his name tag read Jace spent the next hour bouncing between kids, giving tips, high-fiving, even holding a boy's hand as he tried his first drop-in. It was clear the kids loved him. He remembered their names, cheered them on, and kept them safe without being overbearing. Hey, Weston asked casually when they crossed paths by the foam pit. You a trainer? Jace looked up. Technically no, but I help out. We're short-staffed, so someone's gotta do it. Why were you short-staffed? Jace shrugged. Bryce cut hours last month. Said we didn't need more than 3 people per shift. But weekends get crazy. Weston nodded slowly. Doesn't it get overwhelming? Yeah, Jace said, wiping sweat from his brow. But these kids deserve attention. Some of them got no one else cheering for them. I can't just ignore that, man. Weston felt something tighten in his chest. He remembered being that kid once awkward, unsure, needing someone to believe in him. Later that afternoon, Weston saw it happen. A boy around 10 was turned away at the gate. He had a skateboard, pads, and decent shoes, but they weren't from the shop. Bryce stopped him flat. We don't allow off-brand shoes, he said. Liability. The mother looked stunned. These are safe. He's skated in them for months. I don't make the rules, Bryce huffed. Buy the official ones or come back another day. Jace overheard. He walked over, quiet but firm. Bryce, that's not in the handbook. If his gear passes safety, he's good. Bryce shot him a glare. You want to run this place? Be my guest. Weston stepped in, heart pounding. I'll help with the gear check. Let's give it a look. Bryce rolled his eyes but didn't stop it. Jace inspected the shoes, nodded. They're fine. The boy got in. His mom gave Jace a grateful smile. Thank you. As the kids skated off, Weston turned to Jace. You always stand up like that? Jace shrugged. Someone's gotta. These kids come first. Everything else is noise. Weston didn't say anything, but inside he knew this kid Jace was the heartbeat of this place. And no one above him even saw it. Not yet. By the end of his second day undercover, Weston had already stopped checking his watch. Time moved differently inside the park. The noise never let up, wheels scraping, boards slapping down, kids shouting to each other from across ramps. It was controlled chaos, and without enough hands on deck, it teetered close to actual disorder. Bryce gave him a clipboard that morning and told him to handle the waiver station, though no one explained the process. The software was outdated, and the tablet glitched every few entries. Parents grew impatient. One man, holding a toddler on his hip, muttered about another skate park run like a garage sale. Weston apologized and tried to keep things moving, but he couldn't help noticing how Bryce lingered near the back office most of the morning, earbuds in, barely glancing up. Jace was already on the floor when Weston arrived, working with a group of kids near the quarter pipe. There was a slight limp in his walk that hadn't been there the day before. Around mid-morning, Weston caught up to him beside the vending machine. You all right? Weston asked. Jace bent down to retie his shoe, wincing slightly. Rolled my ankle last week. Didn't want to miss shifts, though. They not giving you time to rest? Jace glanced toward the front desk. Bryce said if I couldn't move, I could clock out. So, I'm moving. Weston leaned against the wall, arms crossed. No one else to cover? Not unless you count Logan, but he's been ditching shifts. Showed up late last Sunday, and Bryce didn't say a word. I guess some people get more slack. Why's that? Logan's his cousin. That answered more than Weston wanted it to. He watched Jace limp back toward the ramps. The kid didn't complain, didn't slow down. He picked up a fallen board, handed it back to a nervous girl, and pointed out where she should place her feet. Behind him, Bryce emerged from the back office, finally off the phone. He strolled over to Logan, who had just arrived 40 minutes late by Weston's count, and gave him a fist bump. You good for the counter today? Bryce asked him. Logan yawned. Yeah, whatever. You guys figure it out, Bryce said, heading toward the pro shop. I'm doing inventory. Weston stepped behind the counter a few minutes later, where Logan stood tapping through a dating app on one phone and watching a video on another. A small clump of customers waited to ask about rentals. You taking these? Weston asked. Logan didn't look up. They can wait. They've been waiting. Logan finally glanced over. You knew? Then let me clue you in. If you jump every time one of these parents starts whining, you'll burn out before Friday. Weston didn't respond. He stepped around the counter and helped the next person in line. A mother with twin boys thanked him and handed over their forms. "You're not gonna last," Logan muttered under his breath as Weston logged their info. "Serious. Guys like you usually ghost before the week's out." Weston didn't answer. He had more important things to focus on. That afternoon, a delivery truck pulled up behind the building. Weston offered to help unload. The driver handed him a dolly and pointed to the boxes: new helmets, pads, and branded merchandise. As Weston wheeled the first load inside, he noticed a clipboard with an invoice clipped to the top. He scanned the list. The markup on some of the gear was outrageous. He set the boxes near the storage room and found Bryce inside, counting skate shoes. "These new pads," Weston said, holding up a sealed pack. "They're going for nearly double retail." Bryce didn't look up. "That's what the market allows. We're not a charity." "But is that our actual pricing policy?" Bryce turned slowly. "You asking questions on day 2? Just trying to understand how we make this accessible for kids if parents can't even afford the gear." Bryce's eyes narrowed. "You're not here to understand the business. You're here to clock in and follow instructions." As Weston walked away, he passed Jace again. The kid was helping a boy adjust his helmet strap. The boy's dad stood nearby, fidgeting with his wallet. "We can't afford the big set," he said. "Is there a loaner option?" Jace hesitated. "We're not supposed to loan gear without ID and a deposit." The man held up his ID, but the deposit was a problem. He looked embarrassed. "I've got a few older sets in the bin," Jace said quietly. "They're used but safe. I'll make sure he's good." The man's eyes welled slightly. "That'd mean a lot." Jace nodded and disappeared into the back. A few minutes later, the boy was skating down the practice ramp with a huge grin, elbow pads slightly too big but secure. Weston pulled Jace aside later. "You bend rules often?" "Only when they're stupid." "Does that get you in trouble?" Jace gave him a sideways glance. "Not yet. But I figure if I get fired for helping a kid skate, maybe I shouldn't be here anyway." That night, Weston stayed late to help close. Logan had disappeared an hour early without punching out, and no one had noticed. Jace swept the floor with one hand and iced his ankle with the other. It was clear he wasn't going to ask for help. "You been here long?" Weston asked. Jace looked up from the broom. 18 months. "You want to do more than this?" Jace leaned on the handle, thinking. "I want to teach full-time. Maybe build a program for kids who can't afford lessons. But that's not really a thing here. And Bryce won't even let me post flyers." "Why not?" "Says anything not pre-approved goes in the trash." Jace smiled faintly. He tossed a flyer I made last month. Had a whole plan laid out: weekly sessions, sliding scale tuition. Said I was overstepping. Weston nodded. "You still have it?" "In my backpack." "Why?" "I'd like to see it." Jace studied him for a second, then shrugged. "Sure. Just don't expect a masterpiece." He pulled out a folded paper from a worn backpack in the storage room. Weston opened it. The flyer was hand-drawn, rough but thoughtful. There was a schedule, a breakdown of suggested donations, and a spot for sign-ups. The header read, "Everyone deserves a place to ride." Weston folded it carefully and handed it back. "You ever think of running your own place?" Jace laughed. "On what money? I still live with my mom. Half my paycheck goes to groceries." Weston didn't laugh with him. He left the park that night with a pit in his stomach. Not just from what he'd seen, but from what he hadn't. No one above Bryce seemed to know or care how the park was being run. There were no checks, no accountability. A kid like Jace, the one holding everything together, went unseen. And kids like the boy with the hand-me-down pads were nearly pushed out before they even got the chance to try. Back at his hotel, Weston sat on the edge of the bed, the flyer still in his hand. He thought about the mission he'd built his company on. Accessibility, passion,
Community.
somewhere along the line, it had become a chain of locations and spreadsheets. He trusted the structure would uphold the values. But structure without oversight was just a shell. He looked at the flyer again. Everyone deserves a place to ride. Something had to change. But not with memos or meetings. It had to start with truth. And truth had to start with a reveal. But not yet. Not until he saw how deep this rot really went. By Thursday, the tension at the Glendale skate park had thickened into something Weston could feel in his shoulders. It wasn't just the noise or the tight shifts, it was the constant sense that the place was barely holding together. The staff was stretched thin, and no one seemed to be steering the ship, least of all Bryce, who floated in and out of the front office like a guest rather than a manager. Weston had started arriving early, before opening, under the pretense of wanting to learn the ropes. In truth, he wanted to see what the place looked like before the lights went on. This morning, the training ramp had a chip in one corner that had gone unmarked for at least 2 days. He found an old roll of caution tape in the supply closet and tied it around the area himself. As he taped the railing, he heard the door click open behind him. "You always this eager, Wes." Weston turned to find Jace dragging in 2 mop buckets. His gait was slower than the day before, and the bruising around his ankle was more visible now that he ditched his high tops in favor of looser slides. "Figured I'd beat the rush," Weston said. Jace let out a dry laugh and set one of the buckets down near the foam pit. If rush meant broken gear, backed up toilets, and kids throwing up orange soda on the stairs, yeah, you're right on time. Weston crossed the floor with him. "You always open solo?" "Most days." Logan's not much of a morning person. As they started prepping the front desk, Weston spotted a clipboard with a shift schedule left out from the night before. He scanned it quickly. Jace was working 6 days that week, all mid to close. Logan had 5 shifts, none longer than 5 hours, and 3 of them overlapped with Bryce's. Weston made a mental note, then slid the clipboard back where it was. By mid-morning, the park was full. Thursdays weren't usually busy, but the local middle school had a field trip scheduled, and the staff hadn't been warned. A line of kids poured through the door with 2 overwhelmed chaperones trying to wrangle permission slips. "Bryce know about this?" Weston asked as he helped with wristbands. Jace glanced up from where he was fitting helmets. If he did, he didn't say anything. "Did they call ahead?" One of the chaperones said they emailed last week. "Got a confirmation." Jace sighed. That explains why the lesson group is double booked. While Weston helped distribute gear, he noticed a boy standing near the side wall, holding his skateboard tight against his chest. He wasn't talking to the other kids, just watching the ramps with a kind of rigid stillness. His jeans were 2 sizes too big, cinched with a frayed belt, and his hoodie sleeves hung past his fingers. Weston walked over. "First time here?" The boy nodded. "You skate much?" The boy hesitated, then whispered, "Not really. I just wanted to try." Weston crouched beside him. "You got pads?" "I don't have money for that stuff." Before Weston could reply, Jace appeared beside them. He looked at the boy, then at Weston. "Second bin in the back," he said quietly. "I'll cover it." "You sure?" Weston asked.
Yeah.
He's got that look. Same one I had the first time I showed up somewhere like this. Jace walked off without waiting for thanks. Weston turned back to the boy. "You're in good hands," he said. Once the boy was geared up, Jace spent the next half hour working with him near the flat ground. He didn't push him, didn't rush. Just showed him how to balance, how to pivot gently, how to bail without getting hurt. The kid didn't smile, not really, but his shoulders dropped a little. That was enough. By late afternoon, the chaperones were gone, and the regular crowd started filtering in. Parents asked about lesson availability, but Bryce had disappeared again. When Weston checked the office, the door was locked from the inside. "Is Bryce even on the floor anymore?" he asked Jace quietly. Only when the district rep scheduled to visit. Weston frowned. That happen often? Once a month. Maybe. Around 5, a noise echoed from the back hallway, the sound of something heavy crashing to the floor. Weston followed it and found the snack supply shelf tipped over, boxes scattered everywhere. Jace stood nearby, holding his wrist, his face pale. What happened? Reaching for a crate. Shelf wasn't secure. It slipped. Weston looked at his hand. Sprained? Probably. I'll wrap it. You need to ice that. I need to finish closing later. You can't close like this. Jace didn't argue. He just turned and grabbed the broom with his uninjured hand. At that moment, Weston felt the line snap. He walked straight to the office and knocked. No answer. He knocked again, louder. Finally, the door cracked open and Bryce peeked out, phone still pressed to his ear. I'm on a call. We've got an injury on the floor. That shelf in the back collapsed. Bryce frowned. Did anyone else see it happen?
Yes. Me.
All right. File an incident report. I'll review it later. Weston didn't move. He needs medical attention. Then tell him to go to urgent care. Not my job to babysit. Weston stepped back, hands clenched. Later, after the last kid had left and the lights were dimmed, Weston stood near the entrance with Jace, who was now wearing a makeshift bandage of gauze and tape. You should have gone home. Didn't want to leave you all hanging. No one would have blamed you. Maybe. But someone would have had to clean up the vomit in the foam pit. Weston let out a breath. You ever think about quitting? Jace looked at him, tired but steady. Every morning. But then I think about the kids who show up here with nothing. No pads, no support, no clue what they're doing. And I remember what it felt like to have someone show up for me when I didn't deserve it. I guess I'm just trying to pay that forward. The words hit Weston harder than he expected. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the folded flyer Jace had shown him days before. I read this again, he said. It's got potential. Real structure. You thought through the logistics. Jace blinked. You keep that on you? I keep a lot of things on me. Reminders. He handed it back, but Jace didn't take it. You should pitch this to someone who can make it happen. I already did. Jace furrowed his brow. Who? Weston paused. Then he stepped back, reached for the keys in his jacket pocket, and pulled out a lanyard with a metal access card. He held it up. Name on the account says Weston Fields. Jace went still. No way. I founded the park network 7 years ago. Jace took a step back, eyes wide. You've been here all week. I needed to see it for myself. Not the version they send in reports. The real thing. Jace looked away, then back. Why now? Because I got a message from a parent saying her son was turned away for wearing the wrong shoes. And I realized I didn't know what was happening inside my own walls anymore. Jace didn't say anything. Weston continued, voice firmer now. I watched you work injured. I watched you cover for others without recognition. I saw you treat every kid like they mattered, no matter what they brought in with them. That's the kind of leadership we're supposed to be building. And it's being buried under laziness and favoritism. Jace finally spoke. You're gonna fire Bryce, aren't you?
Yes.
First thing tomorrow. And Logan's gone too. Jace let out a breath he'd been holding. What about the kids? We're restructuring. You're not just helping anymore. You're running the new junior program. Full-time, with a real salary and benefits. Jace stared at him. You serious? Completely. After a long pause, Jace nodded, slowly. Then he looked around at the empty park. You know, he said, there's a kid named Marcus who comes in on Fridays. Always wears this old army jacket, barely talks to anyone. I think he could be something if someone spent time with him. Then we'll make time, Weston said. Starting tomorrow. Jace smiled, and for the first time all week, it reached his eyes. The lights flicked off one by one, and they stepped out into the cold air. Neither of them said anything else. They didn't need to. The next morning, Weston arrived before sunrise. The sky was still an inky gray, the parking lot empty except for a janitor's van and a single bicycle chained to the fence. He unlocked the front door himself, no Bryce, no Logan, and made his way inside. The place was quiet in a way it hadn't been all week. It was the kind of silence that settled before a storm broke. By the time Jace arrived, limping slightly, Weston was already seated behind the front desk, flipping through a thick binder of employee records and maintenance logs. He looked up without ceremony. "Got a minute?" Jace hesitated near the entrance. "You sure you want to do this now?" "No better time." They sat in the break room, where a dented microwave and empty coffee pot had long since given up trying to be useful. Weston slid a manila folder across the table. Bryce's full performance record. Spotty attendance. Ignored maintenance requests. Multiple customer complaints forwarded to his inbox with no record of response. And he's been logging Logan's hours manually into payroll, most of them inflated. Jace let out a slow breath, but didn't speak. "He's not just lazy," Weston said. "He's eroding the foundation." "That stops today." Jace sat back. "What happens next?" "I've got the district supervisor driving in. She'll handle the termination. I'll make the announcement to the team myself. But I need you to stay on the floor. The kids still need you." "I'll manage," Jace said quietly.
No, Weston replied.
"You won't just manage. You're going to lead." By the time the park opened, Bryce was already in the back office, oblivious to what was coming. Logan strolled in 15 minutes later, earbuds in, and was surprised to see Weston at the front counter, wearing his actual name badge this time. He stopped mid-step. "Wait. Yes." Logan turned toward the office. "I didn't know, you will now." Weston didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He nodded toward the storage hallway, where the district supervisor waited to begin the termination process. Logan hesitated, then walked off without a word. Jace stayed near the ramps, helping a kid adjust his trucks while pretending not to watch. His hands were steady, but his jaw was tight. The firing didn't take long. Bryce left through the side exit, avoiding eye contact with everyone. No shouting, no scene. He just walked out, car keys jangling in his hand. Weston waited until the afternoon to gather the remaining staff. Only 4 were present, 2 part-timers and Jace. They stood near the foam pit, the sounds of skateboards echoing behind them. "I owe all of you honesty," Weston began. "I've been disconnected. I let a culture grow here that doesn't reflect what this company was built on. That's on me." No one spoke. "I went undercover to see the park for what it really is. Not through reports or filtered updates. Through your eyes. And what I saw was a place being held together by a few people doing the work of many." He glanced at Jace, then back at the group. "Starting today, this park gets a new direction. We'll be hiring 2 new full-time staff members within the next 2 weeks. We're bringing in a certified maintenance crew to inspect and repair every inch of this facility. And no more time card manipulation. Everyone clocks in and out through the system, accurately." The 2 part-timers exchanged glances. One of them, a girl with chipped nail polish and a nose ring, raised her hand slightly. "What about scheduling? We've been getting schedules like 12 hours before our shifts." "That ends now," Weston said. "Schedules will be posted a week in advance. Any last-minute changes will come with hazard pay." He turned to Jace. "And starting next month, Jace will be heading up our new community program. He'll be developing an after-school curriculum and running weekend intro sessions for kids who can't afford lessons. He'll have full discretion on who gets assistance." Jace looked stunned. "I thought you earned it," Weston said. "Not just by showing up, but by showing others how to belong here." The girl near the foam pit let out an audible breath. The other part-timer nodded slowly. After the meeting, Weston returned to the front desk. He didn't plan to stay long-term. This wasn't about micromanaging. But the transition had to be real. He started reviewing the week's customer feedback. Several parents had left comments online mentioning a new guy who was helpful and patient. One had even mentioned Jace by name. He printed them out and pinned them to the corkboard in the break room. That evening, the atmosphere in the park shifted. It wasn't dramatic. There were still spills, still loud music, still a drink spilled near the benches. But the staff moved with more focus. Jace ran a small impromptu session with 3 kids who'd never been on a board before. One of them dropped in for the first time. She didn't land it cleanly, but she laughed when she fell. At closing, Jace lingered near the lockers, staring at the flyer Weston had tacked up beside the shift schedule. It had been redesigned by a graphic artist Weston had hired that morning. Same name, same mission, just cleaner. Professional.
Real.
You still good with the name? Weston asked, stepping beside him. Jace nodded.
Yeah.
I think it fits. You'll have a budget, Weston said. Not massive, but enough to get boards, pads, and staff. You'll report directly to the youth development coordinator. You'll have time to build it right. Jace looked over, eyes a little red but steady. I don't even know what to say. Don't say anything. Just build the place you needed when you were 12. The lights dimmed, and the sound of the last vacuum faded in the background.
They walked out side by side.
The air had cooled, the sun long gone behind the ridgeline. Across the street, a couple of teenagers practiced ollies under a parking lot lamp. One of them slipped and fell hard. The other laughed, then helped him up. Jace watched them for a moment. You think this sticks? He asked. It will if we keep showing up, Weston said. Not just when it's easy. Always. Jace nodded again, then looked back at the building. It already feels different. Good, Weston said. That means we're doing it right. They parted ways in the parking lot. Weston unlocked his car, but didn't start it. He looked back at the park, its faded sign, its cracked sidewalk, the faint sound of a board snapping down in the distance. There was still work to do.
There always would be.
But now someone was finally doing it for the right reasons.